I'm Steve Stockman. I'm from the state of Texas, down 9th District. I have sponsored a letter to Newt Gingrich to show that freshmen and others alike are opposed to bailing out a sovereign nation. I call it the Clinton bill. It is not a Republican bill. I've read the Constitution, and nowhere in this Constitution does it talk about bailing out sovereign nations. And I don't think it's going to pass. We're gaining support all the time. We have many people that have signed the letter already. It's just bad. It's a bad deal for America, and it's a bad deal for the American people. And I strongly oppose it, and I'll work very hard to oppose it. I'm also serving on the Banking Committee.
David Funderburk, the new congressman from North Carolina.
The American people have been stuck with someone else's bill again, already burdened with over a $4 trillion debt. The taxpayer has been told by the Clinton administration he will have to fork over another $40 billion to bail out the Mexican economy. Enough is enough. For half a century, we've shamelessly handed over billions to dictators, petty despots, and corrupt state-controlled economies. And they are no closer to free market than they were when we found them. We never seem to learn from the past. The Mexican bailout is a classic case of how out of touch Washington is with reality. We've already rescued the Mexican peso 3 times before, in 1976, 82, and 88. Each time we saved the Mexican currency, the government there refused to reform itself. It is still rife with corruption and so forth. A few days into office, the Mexican government pulled the plug on the peso, sent its value plummeting by 30%, leaving Wall Street and the big banks who had unwisely invested in Mexico holding the bag. Rather than paying for their mistakes, the big financiers demanded the taxpayers bail Mexico out and in turn force the American people to pay off someone else's bad investments.
Duncan Hunter, just arrived.
Sure. Well, thank you, Pat. I'm against this bailout also, and I think that upon a deeper understanding and analysis of the bailout, it becomes clear that, number one, we're not going to have an apocalyptic situation if we fail to bail out Mexico. And number two, and that goes back to the first reason, in a way we're bailing out other entities than the people of Mexico, and specifically the big firms, the big investment bankers that hold large numbers of Tesa Bonos are counting on the American taxpayer to foot the bill, to bail them out, and essentially to turn those instruments into guaranteed loans. So in reality, a large part of this bailout is not bailing out the people of Mexico. We're bailing out, to a large degree, investment bankers around the world, and this is a Wall Street bailout, not a Main Street bailout, not a Main Street in the United States or a Main Street in Mexico. So for those reasons and a couple others, I oppose this bailout.
Freshman Congressman Zach Wamp of Tennessee.
The people, I really believe, won on November the 8th, and I've encouraged my freshman colleagues to vote the wishes of the American people. Sometimes we demean the American people by saying that they just don't understand. And you know, sometimes we need to recognize that this is their government and we are their representatives. And I, for one, am here to vote the wishes of the people. And I hope that this movement is not just a Republican movement. I hope it's a populist movement. I hope it's a people's movement. And I hope that they've actually regained a voice here in Washington, D.C.
This is a bipartisan effort, and I would urge the congressmen and women of both parties to urge a flat-out no vote on this $40 billion bailout, and the reasons are several. First, the Salinas Zedillo regime is unworthy of America's money and unworthy of America's confidence, which Mr. Rubin asked us to restore. Why? Because the Salinas regime deceived us about the value of the peso. It deceived us about the extent of Mexico's reserves behind that peso. It devalued by 35% at least, thereby defrauding investors, many of them Americans, many in mutual funds, of millions and millions of dollars. So it doesn't deserve our confidence. The purpose of these new loans is to pay off the old loans that are now held by American bankers, big bankers, and American investors in New York. I think that we had a situation here where no one bailed out Washington, D.C. yet. No one has said they're going to bail out Orange County. No one bailed out those old folks out at Lincoln Federal Savings and Loan who made a mistake, thought their money was secure, and it wasn't secure. They were wiped out. We saw them crying on television. No one bailed them out. I think it's time we held Citibank and J.P. Morgan to the same standards as we hold the American people. If you and I put our pension money down there in some of those Tessabonos and got that good rate of interest, and they went down and we were wiped out, no one would bail us out. Why are we bailing out giant banks that have hundreds of MBAs to assess the creditworthiness of their clients?
Our administration has forged a plan that makes available United States government guarantees to secure private sector loans to Mexico.
On the Mexican peso, Mr. Boehner made some critical comments about the president abandoning the congressional package. Can you categorically state for us on the record that you are in support of what the president?
I think I have already categorically stated on the record. I mean, my position is very simple. The president had two choices. He could have decided to stick with a legislative package which I believe would have taken 2 or 3 weeks to get through the Congress and would have taken virtually all of his time for that period. Or he could move using the Exchange Stabilization Fund under his presidential authority. He had the support of a bipartisan leadership group to use his authority because it was the only practical thing to do yesterday. If you looked at what was happening in exchange markets in Latin America, the idea of trying to spend 3 weeks getting something through the Senate as the exchange markets deteriorated, I think would have been very inappropriate. I commend the president for his decisiveness.
Mr. Boehner, how much resentment is there about the Plan B Mexican loan agreement?
I think that the situation with Mexico is unfortunate. I think that the action taken by the president was unfortunate as well.
Mr. Vice President, one of the Republican leadership team just moments ago came out to say that House Republicans are not pleased with the deal that Clinton made for Mexico, that basically they wish that the president had made a greater case for it, and he said there'll be hearings on the very issue.
Let me comment, because he's here as our guest, and I think it was very unfortunate to remember the leadership come out at, when the vice president's here being very helpful and very cooperative, frankly. The President of the United States took a very difficult decision yesterday. It's not the one he would, I think, most have preferred, but it was a realistic assessment by the leaders of both parties about how much time and effort it would take to go a legislative route. The president exercised his authority. He took a tremendous burden on his shoulders. He did what key leaders like Alan Greenspan, the Republican appointee and chairman of the Federal Reserve, thought was necessary. And I think people at a minimum should recognize that the president had the courage to do what he was being told by very sophisticated experts. And I think it's easy to say, in retrospect, that there are always 15 other answers. The fact is, the most sophisticated financial leaders all agreed, including critics of the details, agreed that something decisive had to be done because the world financial system was being shaky. I said yesterday that I commended the president, and I think that we'll have plenty of time for hearings, but the hearings ought to look at the totality of the situation. And I don't think it's fair to focus either on the president or vice president.
Let me comment briefly by saying, first of all, a word of thanks to the Speaker.
While presidents are important, they are, in effect, an elected kingship.